Did you know that the pain of loneliness registers in the same part of your brain as physical pain? That hollow ache you feel when you're sitting alone in your living room, watching the clock tick toward another empty evening, isn't just in your head. It's as real as a broken bone. And according to research, chronic loneliness damages your body in ways comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes every single day. Let that sink in for a moment. 15 cigarettes, daily. But I'm here to tell you something that might change everything. Loneliness is not your destiny. Being alone doesn't have to mean feeling lonely. There's a profound difference between these two states, and understanding this difference can literally transform the rest of your life. Let me share Arthur's story. He came to my office 6 months ago, a 72-year-old retired accountant who could barely look me in the eye. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier. His daughter lived across the country, and his days had become an endless loop of television, microwaved meals, and early bedtimes just to make the hours pass faster. He told me he felt invisible, like he was taking up space in a world that had moved on without him. His blood pressure was climbing. He wasn't sleeping well, and he'd started forgetting things. Simple things like whether he'd taken his medication or locked the front door. The thing is, Arthur wasn't actually isolated. His neighbors said hello. He had a phone. He could have joined clubs or activities. But none of that mattered because he was drowning in loneliness. And loneliness, as the research shows us, wreaks havoc on every system in your body. It elevates your blood pressure, disrupts your sleep patterns, impairs your memory, weakens your immune system, and increases your risk of dementia and early death. The inflammation it causes in your body is measurable, dangerous, and progressive. But here's the remarkable part of Arthur's story, and why I'm sharing it with you today. When I saw Arthur last week, he was a different person. Not because he'd suddenly been surrounded by people, not because his daughter had moved back home, not because he'd remarried or won the lottery. Arthur transformed his life by learning to distinguish between being alone and feeling lonely, and by embracing what I call purposeful solitude. He's busy now. He's content. He actually told me he sometimes wishes he had more time to himself because he's got projects and interests and reasons to wake up each morning with anticipation rather than dread. What changed? Arthur learned 6 strategies that I'm about to share with you. These aren't complicated medical interventions or expensive therapies. They're practical, research-backed approaches that have helped countless older adults transform their relationship with solitude and, in doing so, dramatically improve their mental, emotional, and physical health. The first strategy is perhaps the most important, and it's this. Embrace solitude as an opportunity, not a punishment. We live in a society that treats silence and being alone as problems to be fixed, voids to be filled with noise and distraction. But neuroscience research has revealed something fascinating about what happens in your brain during quiet solitude. There's a network of brain regions, called the default mode network, that activates when you're not focused on the external world, when you're just sitting quietly with your thoughts. This network is crucial for processing emotions, understanding yourself, consolidating memories, and finding meaning in your experiences. When you constantly distract yourself from solitude with television noise or endless scrolling through your phone, you're actually preventing your brain from doing essential emotional and psychological work. Margaret, one of my patients, realized she'd been running from silence her entire life. She was 76 and had spent decades caring for others, raising children, managing a household, working part-time jobs. When she finally retired and found herself with empty afternoons, she felt guilty for just sitting and reading. She thought she should always be doing something productive, something visible. We talked about how rest and reflection aren't laziness but necessary components of well-being. She started setting aside 30 minutes each morning to sit with her coffee and a book. No television, no phone, just her and the words on the page and the morning light coming through her window. She told me those 30 minutes became the anchor of her day, a ritual she looked forward to, a time when she felt most like herself. The guilt disappeared. The blue mood she'd been experiencing lifted. Purposeful solitude, she discovered, was actually a gift. This brings us naturally to the second strategy: create meaning through personal rituals. When you retire, or when your daily routine is disrupted by loss or change, you lose structure. And human beings need structure. We need rhythms and patterns that give our days shape and purpose. Without them, time becomes this shapeless thing that just flows past us, and we feel adrift. David came to me feeling exactly this way. He'd been an engineer, someone whose days were scheduled down to the quarter hour for 40 years. Suddenly, every day was Saturday. And while that sounds wonderful in theory, in practice it left him feeling useless and unmoored. We talked about creating simple, intentional rituals that would give his days structure. Not a rigid schedule, but small, meaningful habits he could look forward to. He started grinding his own coffee beans each morning, taking his time with the process, enjoying the aroma and the routine of it. He reserved the hour after breakfast for the newspaper crossword puzzle at his kitchen table. He took a walk every afternoon at 3 o'clock, rain or shine, always the same route through the neighborhood park. These weren't grand gestures or impressive accomplishments, but they provided him with a framework, with small moments of purpose and completion that added up to a sense that his days mattered. Research supports what David discovered intuitively. Studies show that people who maintain personal rituals and routines experience lower levels of anxiety and depression, better sleep quality, and a stronger sense of control over their lives. The rituals themselves matter less than the intentionality behind them. It could be tending to a small garden, writing in a journal, preparing a proper lunch instead of grazing from the refrigerator, lighting a candle while you have your evening tea. What matters is that these are your chosen rituals, things you do with awareness and purpose, not just habits you've fallen into. The third strategy is one that excites me tremendously because it directly combats one of the most damaging myths about aging, the idea that your brain is done learning, that cognitive decline is inevitable, that curiosity is for the young. Nothing could be further from the truth. Your brain remains remarkably plastic, capable of forming new connections and pathways throughout your entire life. Neuroplasticity, as we call it, means that learning literally changes the structure of your brain, strengthening it, protecting it, keeping it resilient and healthy. Invest in lifelong learning. Not because you need credentials or because you're preparing for some future career, but because curiosity and discovery are among life's greatest pleasures, and because they keep your mind sharp and engaged. Susan, a 73-year-old former teacher, came to me concerned about her memory. She'd noticed herself forgetting names and losing her train of thought mid-sentence. We ran tests and ruled out anything serious. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the worry that this was the beginning of an inevitable decline. I asked her what she'd always wanted to learn about but never had time for when she was working and raising a family. She thought for a moment and said ancient Egypt. She'd always been fascinated by the pyramids and the pharaohs, but had never pursued that interest. I encouraged her to dive in. Not to take a formal class necessarily, though that was certainly an option, but to simply follow her curiosity wherever it led. She started with library books, then discovered YouTube videos from university professors, then found online forums where amateur Egyptologists discussed the latest archaeological discoveries. Within weeks, she was telling me things I'd never known about burial practices and hieroglyphics and the mystery of how the stones were transported. More importantly, she felt sharper. She felt interested. She felt like she was contributing to conversations instead of just nodding along. Her memory concerns didn't disappear entirely, but they became less frightening because she was actively proving to herself that her mind was still capable of growth and discovery. The research on this is compelling. Studies consistently show that older adults who engage in mentally stimulating activities have better cognitive function, slower rates of cognitive decline, and lower risks of dementia. It doesn't matter what you learn. It could be a new language, bird watching, astronomy, cooking techniques from different cultures, local history, watercolor painting, or how to identify trees by their bark. What matters is that you're stretching your brain, making it work in new ways, creating fresh neural pathways that keep your mind flexible and resilient. The fourth strategy takes us outside, into the natural world, because there's mounting evidence that nature and gentle movement are powerful medicines for both body and mind. Find comfort in nature and movement. I'm not talking about running marathons or hiking mountains, though if you're capable of and interested in those activities, wonderful. I'm talking about something much simpler and more accessible. Regular, gentle movement combined with time spent in natural settings, even if that's just your backyard or a neighborhood park. Robert's transformation illustrates this beautifully. He was 79 when I first met him, living alone after his wife moved into a care facility. He'd become almost entirely sedentary, sitting in his recliner most of the day, eating meals from a tray, barely moving from room to room. His mood was low, his joints were stiff, and his world had shrunk to the walls of his house. I didn't push him to join a gym or start an exercise program. Instead, I suggested he simply sit on his front porch for 15 minutes each morning. Just sit there, watch the birds, feel the air, notice the weather. He thought I was crazy, but he tried it. After a few days, he started noticing things. A cardinal that visited the tree in his yard each morning, the way the light changed with the seasons, the neighbors are walking their dog. He started putting out birdseed. Then he got interested in the plants in pots on his porch, started watering them, talking to them even. Within a couple of weeks, he was walking to the corner and back, then around the block. Not for exercise, he insisted, but just to see what was happening in the neighborhood. 6 months later, he was walking daily, tending a small garden, and his mood had lifted dramatically. His joints moved more easily. He slept better. He felt, in his words, like he had companionship again, even though he was still living alone. What Robert discovered is what researchers call ecotherapy, the healing power of nature. Studies show that time spent in natural settings, even brief periods, lowers blood pressure, reduces stress hormones, improves mood, and enhances cognitive function. The Japanese have a practice called forest bathing, simply being present in nature. That's been shown to boost immune function and reduce inflammation. You don't need a forest. A park, a garden, even watching trees through your window provides benefits. And when you combine this with gentle movement, walking or tai chi or gentle stretching, you're giving your body and mind exactly what they need to thrive. Now, the fifth strategy addresses something that almost every lonely person I've treated struggles with: the voice inside their head. Practice gratitude and positive self-talk. When you're alone a lot, you become very familiar with your internal dialogue. And for many people, that dialogue is harsh, critical, and relentlessly negative. You tell yourself you're a burden, that you're not interesting anymore, that you've got nothing to contribute, that you should be grateful just to be healthy and alive and not complain about being lonely. That voice, that inner critic, is often louder and more cruel than anyone else in your life would ever be to you. Helen struggled with this terribly. She was 71, widowed, and her internal monologue was a constant stream of self-criticism and negativity. Everything she noticed was what was wrong, what was lacking, what she'd lost. I introduced her to the practice of keeping a gratitude journal, and she was skeptical. She thought it sounded like silly positive thinking, like ignoring reality. But I explained that our brains have what scientists call a negativity bias, a tendency to notice and remember threats and problems more than positive things. This was useful when we were dealing with predators, but now it just makes us miserable. We have to actively train our brains to notice the good, and gratitude practice does exactly that. Helen agreed to try it for 1 month. Each evening before bed, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for that day. At first, they were simple, almost trivial. The mail carrier smiled at her. Her tea was the perfect temperature. The sun came out. But over time, something shifted. She started noticing good things during the day because she knew she'd be writing them down later. She started recognizing that her days weren't empty voids but actually contained moments of beauty, connection, kindness, and pleasure. Her whole perspective began to change. The negative voice didn't disappear, but it got quieter, less powerful, because she had evidence to counter it. Research on gratitude is robust and impressive. Studies show that people who regularly practice gratitude experience higher levels of positive emotions, feel more alive and alert, sleep better, express more compassion and kindness, and even have stronger immune systems. It's one of the most effective interventions for improving well-being. And it costs nothing. Along with gratitude, work on your self-talk. When you notice that critical voice, challenge it. Would you talk to a friend the way you talk to yourself? If not, why do you deserve less kindness? Practice speaking to yourself with the same gentleness and encouragement you'd offer someone you love. This isn't about lying to yourself or ignoring problems. It's about treating yourself with basic human decency and recognizing your inherent worth, regardless of your productivity or social calendar. This leads, naturally, to the sixth and final strategy, which research suggests is perhaps the most powerful of all. Explore new ways to connect with the world. Notice I didn't say make 100 new friends or fill your calendar with social events. For many older adults, especially those who are introverted or who've experienced loss, the idea of traditional socializing feels exhausting or inauthentic. But humans are social creatures. We need to feel that we're part of something larger than ourselves, that we matter, that we have something to contribute. The fastest and most reliable way to create this sense of connection and purpose is through volunteering. The research on volunteering and well-being in older adults is absolutely clear. People who volunteer regularly live longer, have better physical and mental health, report higher life satisfaction, and experience greater sense of purpose than those who don't. And it doesn't require a huge time commitment. Even a few hours a week makes a significant difference. Remember Arthur, whose story I shared at the beginning? The turning point for him came when he started volunteering at his local library, helping repair damaged books. It was quiet work, solitary in some ways, but it gave him a sense of usefulness. He was preserving something valuable. He was contributing. The librarians knew his name. Patrons occasionally thanked him. He felt connected to his community in a way that didn't require him to be social in the traditional sense. He wasn't attending parties or making small talk. He was being useful, and that made all the difference. Think about what you care about, what breaks your heart or lights you up. Animal shelters always need people to socialize cats or walk dogs. Schools need reading tutors. Food banks need sorters and packers. Museums need docents. Hospitals need patient visitors. Environmental groups need trail maintenance volunteers. Political campaigns need phone bankers and envelope stuffers. Theatres need ushers. The options are limitless, and somewhere out there is an organization that desperately needs exactly what you have to offer. If formal volunteering doesn't appeal to you, look for other ways to feel useful and connected. Can you mentor someone younger in your former profession? Can you share your skills, whether that's knitting or woodworking or gardening, by teaching others? Can you write letters to isolated seniors or deployed soldiers? Can you contribute to online communities around your interests? Connection doesn't always look like we think it should. It's not about quantity of relationships, but quality and purpose. Now, I want to be very honest with you about something. I've just shared 6 strategies with you, and if you're like most people, you're feeling a mixture of hope and overwhelm. Maybe you're thinking this all sounds good in theory, but wondering if you can actually do it. Maybe you're thinking it's too late for you. Maybe you're telling yourself that these things work for other people, but wouldn't work for someone like you. I hear that voice because my patients share it with me all the time. Here's what I need you to understand. Information doesn't change lives. Knowledge alone accomplishes nothing. I could give you 1,000 strategies, and if you don't act on even one of them, your life will remain exactly as it is. The patients I've told you about, Arthur and Margaret and David and Susan and Robert and Helen, they didn't transform their lives because they learned something. They transformed their lives because they did something. They took one small step, then another, then another. You don't have to implement all 6 strategies at once. In fact, I'd strongly advise against trying to do that because you'll overwhelm yourself and do nothing. Instead, choose one strategy that resonates with you. The path from loneliness to purposeful solitude isn't a leap. It's a series of small, intentional steps. It's choosing, day after day, to treat your solitude as an opportunity rather than a punishment. It's recognizing that you still have agency, that you still have the power to shape your experience of life. that you're not simply a passive victim of circumstances. I also want you to know that it's normal for this to feel difficult at first. When you've been lonely for a long time, when you've fallen into patterns of isolation and negative thinking, changing those patterns requires effort. Your brain has carved deep grooves, and you're trying to create new pathways. That takes time and repetition. There will be days when you don't want to do your ritual, when you don't feel like writing in your gratitude journal, when the critical voice is especially loud. Do it anyway. Not because you feel like it, but because you're building new habits. And habits require consistency, not motivation. And please, please, be gentle with yourself. You're navigating one of life's most challenging transitions. You're dealing with losses and changes that would test anyone. The fact that you're here, that you're listening to this, that you're even considering trying something new, tells me that you haven't given up, that there's still a part of you that believes life can be better. Honor that part of yourself. Feed it. Let it grow. One more thing I want to address. Some of you might be thinking that what I'm describing sounds like settling, like accepting isolation instead of fighting for real connection. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. If you're experiencing clinical depression, if you're having thoughts of self-harm, if you're so isolated that you're going days without speaking to another human being, please seek professional help. Talk to your doctor. Call a mental health crisis line. Reach out to a counselor or therapist. What I'm sharing with you today are strategies for transforming your relationship with solitude. But they're not substitutes for mental health treatment if that's what you need. For most of you, though, the loneliness you're experiencing isn't a mental health emergency. It's a normal response to real changes and losses in your life, and it can be addressed through the kinds of practical strategies we've discussed. You can learn to be alone without being lonely. You can create a life that feels purposeful and meaningful, even if it looks different than the life you once had. You can find peace and even joy in solitude. That life is available to you, not someday, not when circumstances change, now, today, with the life you currently have. So here's what I want you to do. Before you close this video or move on to something else, choose one strategy. Just one. Write it down. Tell someone about it. Make a commitment to yourself that you'll try this one thing consistently for 2 weeks. Then come back and share your experience in the comments. Tell us what you chose and how it's going. Support others who are on this journey with you. We're all in this together, all trying to navigate the challenges of aging with dignity and grace and purpose. Your later years can be among the richest, most meaningful of your entire life. Solitude can be a gift, a chance to know yourself deeply, to pursue interests without distraction, to find peace in simplicity. But that transformation requires intention and action. It requires you to make a choice, today, to move from loneliness toward purposeful solitude. The question isn't whether you can do this. The question is whether you will. Take that first step. Choose your strategy. Begin today. Your future self will thank you.